For dads, I would also say trust your wife. I know it's your baby too, and I know you're in it together, but I truly do feel like there's something behind like a mother's intuition. So trust your wife and listen to her, even if she's got some ideas that you hadn't considered or anything like that, and just be part of the process. My husband did not miss a single appointment. He was at every single appointment. He even came to my 6-week follow-up appointment. That's probably the most helpful thing than anything else that you can do, is just being there for her. So trust her and just be there for her, hold her hand through all of it.
Welcome back to the Pregnancy and Birth Made Easy podcast. I have with me here today, Jaycie. She is an MEB student, but she is a My Essential Birth student. And she is here to share her birth story with us. So with that, Jaycie, will you say hi to everybody? Tell us a little about you, maybe introduce yourself and your family, where you're from, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, my name is Jaycie. I am from a small town in South Dakota. My husband and I live in the hometown we were born and raised in, so that's super fun to be able to be raising our little man right next to grandma and grandpa's and all that good stuff. So I'm a school psychologist full-time. My husband is a business owner and an engineer, and we were married back in June of 2022. High school sweethearts. We started dating in high school, all through college, did the long distance thing. And then we moved back to our hometown in April 2023. And about a month later, we found out we were pregnant with our first baby. So yeah, that's kind of where our story starts.
Awesome. I love it. Let's start out. I would love to hear about your pregnancy. So was there anything abnormal, or maybe even just talk to me about like how you knew you were pregnant? Did you have any fun symptoms or signs, and then any nausea or anything like that? Kind of walk me through your pregnancy.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I didn't know I was pregnant right away. He was a little bit of a surprise, but I just one Saturday morning, I was like, you know what, I should maybe take a test. So took a test and there it was. Clear as day, positive. So we were super excited right away. We always knew we wanted to start a family, and it was just God's timing to start it then when he did. So as far as my pregnancy, very typical. Nothing, no major things, nothing I would say out of the ordinary. Being a first-time mom, like every little thing, at the beginning I kind of worried. Every little thing I was like, oh no, what does this mean? What does this mean? But nothing ended up being out of the ordinary at all. I had some pretty significant pelvic pain throughout, but honestly, towards the beginning, it seemed like it was more, but just continuing to exercise, walks, and then I started wearing a belly band during walks and stuff like that. That helped significantly. For the gestational diabetes test, I opted to do the fresh test after listening to one of the podcasts and then just doing a little bit of my own research. I ended up doing that. My OB was perfectly fine with that. And so that was negative. It's nothing to worry about there. I also opted, we'll probably get into some of this, but I opted to do the GBS test. And I actually had to do that twice because somehow they lost my results the first time. I don't know. It was weird. But so I did that twice. That was lots of fun. But negative. So nothing to worry about there as well. So I guess just kind of my pregnancy was very normal, which was good. I love being pregnant. I miss it.
I love that. That's awesome. Okay. These are some random questions that came to mind. Don't ask me why I'm asking them, because I haven't asked other people necessarily. So I'm curious if you knew what your cycles were prior to getting pregnant, and if your due date was based off of that cycle date. And I want to hear about your ultrasounds, how early you had them, how many you had, and if they tried to or discussed with you maybe changing any due dates because of that.
I had been tracking my cycle since before we were married. So it was, and I've always had regular cycles. So it wasn't a huge surprise when I said, I was like, I should probably take a test, because it wasn't a huge surprise. But yeah, so we have been tracking cycles. And okay, can you repeat the other questions?
Yeah, sorry. I know I threw a lot at you. Do you remember how long your cycles were?
Yeah, they were regular. I think they were between like that 32, 34 days probably.
Okay. And do you happen to know when you ovulated? Were you tracking that as well, or just when your cycles were happening?
No, I was tracking ovulation. I think we were kind of right there on the, like, within the window. I mean, obviously we had to have been. I guess we thought we were good, but we must not have been. But I mean, we were great now that we know that we have our precious little baby.
Okay. And then tell me a little bit about, did you have an early ultrasound, or at what times did you have ultrasound, and how many did you have?
Yeah. So that was like one of the surprising things being a first time mom. So like we found out on a Saturday and I called like right away Monday morning and I was like, I'm pregnant. Like, when do you want to see me? And they're like, oh, so, and then they like asked all the questions, like, when did you find out? I was like 2 days ago. And, they asked about like my like last period and all that stuff. So they were like doing the math in their head and they're like, okay, we don't need to see you for another like 4 weeks. And I was like, what? But I'm pregnant. Like, don't you want to see me now? But they didn't. So anyways, we ended up going in, for our first ultrasound, and I believe like right at 10 weeks along when we had that first ultrasound. And that was right about where we thought we were going to be. It might have been a few days later than we thought. I think we were thinking more like around the 9.5 or so, but I think it was like 10 and 1 maybe, that first ultrasound. So we had that first ultrasound, and then we did not have another one until the anatomy scan at 20 weeks. So we had the anatomy scan. At the anatomy scan, because of the position of the baby, they couldn't quite get a good view of the face and some of those structures. So we ended up having another one, I think around 24 weeks maybe. And then we did have one more at, I think like 32 or 34 weeks. In that anatomy scan, there was just something with the mandible, the chin. They were wondering if that wasn't growing quite right, but everything ended up being fine. So we had that follow-up one at 32, and then that was it for them. So I think we ended up having 4. Or maybe, oh gosh, I think I might be wrong. We might not have had that 24-week one. The follow-up might have been only at 32 weeks.
Okay.
We had 3 or 4. I can't remember. Did they mention
anything like, because they do like the measurements and stuff at those, did they mention anything about changing due dates or whatever, or it all just stayed the same?
Nope. Due date never changed. Once they gave us that first due date, that was at the very first 10-week appointment or whatever. Nothing ever changed after that. So that was good.
Okay. So how about your providers? Can we talk about that for a second? Like, what kind of provider did you choose? Where did you find them? Did you change at any point? Were there any red flags? Like, tell me a little about your relationship with your provider and where you found them.
Yeah. So we went the regular OB in a hospital route, and when I first got pregnant, I was like, nothing else was ever a question. Like I said, I'm from a really small town, so like, doulas, midwives, like we'd have to drive like an hour and a half for any of that. Not a doula probably, but like a midwife, or anything like a birthing center, we'd have to drive like an hour and a half. I was due in the middle of January, so that was kind of also scary to me. Like, what is the weather going to be like? But anyway, so we went with the OB provider, about 20 miles away in a little bit of a bigger town. And he was absolutely amazing. I also tell my husband all the time, I miss him. Like, we should go visit him. But, so he was great. I was not his patient prior to getting pregnant, but I had heard really good things about him. And he runs his practice a little bit different. So his office is in the hospital, but he, at the time, was his own private practitioner. So every time I went, I saw him. He knew me. I knew his nurses knew me. And then he was guaranteed he delivers all of his babies. So there was another option in that same town. Yeah, it would just kind of be a revolving door. Whoever was on call when you wanted to make your appointment, that's the provider you'd see. And then, like, whoever was on call the day you went into the hospital, that's who would deliver your baby. And I just didn't like that when there was an option for me to have this other guy who I've heard amazing things about. So it was a great experience. And I wouldn't change it for my first baby. That's for sure. But
Cool.
Yeah, we did have a little bit of a hiccup. So I said he delivers all of his babies, except for he told us on the first day, I'm on vacation, or that's basically it. I'm on vacation. But he's like, I don't really go on vacation that often. Okay. Well, like around November, it was October or November, so I was, I don't know, like 6 months pregnant or so. I got a phone call from his office saying, yeah, so doctor scheduled a vacation over your due date. He was gone like about 4 days before my due date and like 4 days after my due date.
Oh my
So
goodness.
right smack in the middle.
Yeah.
And I was very upset about that. I was like, I don't know what to do, because they offered me an induction, a week. I could come in at 39 weeks. By this time, I was pretty far into the podcast and the birth course, and I knew all the things about induction, and I knew I wanted to avoid that at all costs. So I opted not to do an induction. And I just said, it'll be what it'll be. Like, I just really had to hone in, like, me and my husband on, like, knowing what we wanted, us really practicing all of the things, so then our birth could go the way we wanted to, with or without our doctor. So that was a little bit of a hiccup. He ended up being born. I don't know if this is jumping to the end of the story, but he ended up being born a week early, came on his own.
Oh, wonderful.
Literally on the exact day they would have induced me. So I got my doctor, and it was great.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so it all worked out how it should. But
who would have been the backup? Did you ever get a chance to meet the other person that would have, since this is the gentleman that does all of the deliveries, or like, would it just be whoever's at the hospital? What was that going to look like?
It would have been who was ever at the hospital. I was very, very worried about that, kind of up until I went into labor, because no, I hadn't met any of the other doctors. I think it was an option, but I didn't really know, like, oh, what would like one meeting be? Like, would it probably would have made maybe me feel better. I don't know, or maybe we would have made me more nervous. I don't know, but we didn't meet anybody, so yeah.
Oh my goodness. How did you find this provider? You said that you had heard good things. Was this like friends, family, Facebook groups? Where'd you hear about him?
Yeah, friends and family who had he had delivered some of their babies, and yeah,
Awesome.
so just friends and family in the area.
Cool. Okay, let's talk about your birth partner. How did he support you? What was a challenge maybe that you guys worked through, or the most helpful thing that for the two of you that you guys worked on together? Talk to me about that relationship and how it worked for you.
To start with, I feel like he was the typical first-time dad, husband, really didn't know anything about pregnancy or birth. I'm the oldest of 7, so I had, like, I've taken care of babies, and I've been around pregnant people a lot. So I kind of knew, like, some of it. He's the youngest of 2, so he really didn't have any, like, any background of babies and pregnancy and that kind of stuff. But he was a trooper. So I found out about your podcast and the birth course through a friend who was about 5 months ahead of me for her pregnancy. And so as soon as I told her she was pregnant, she's like, you got to listen to this. So I started listening to it. And as I listened to it, I just started, like, becoming obsessed with it. So I would start sending him things, some of the podcasts. And then we took the hospital birth course just because first-time parents, we wanted all of the information, but I knew I wanted something more too. So we weighed our options, a few different birth courses. Yours one. Then he started going through some of the birth class course lessons with me. And just the more I talked about it, the more questions he had, the more involved he got. So he just slowly but surely got on board with absolutely everything that I kind of wanted along the way. Things that were most helpful, I would say the birth course, just how, like, plainly it was all written out, and like how you looked at both sides. of kind of some of the tough issues. And so that was helpful. That brought a lot of like conversation points to us. And then just we both just loved listening to the birth stories on the podcast. I feel like just the birth stories are, because those are real moms out there. And so it seemed like every time we listened to one, something would stick out and we'd talk about that, or I'd be like, oh, I gotta keep that in my toolbox, or whatever. So yeah, I think those were most helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. How about how you prepared? Like those details of what you did on the daily? Did you do the 3 exercises? Were there relaxation practices that you did? What did that look like for your daily preparation?
Yeah, so I did the daily exercises. Every night we'd just be hanging out in the living room because you don't have anything else to do when you don't have any kids. And I do the squats and the what's the other, like the cow. It's not that, but I can't think of what it's called. Yes, and then the upside down one, I did not like that one. That one was
forward leaning inversion.
I didn't like doing that one.
It's
yes,
not a
but I did it.
Good.
So I did the daily 3 exercises, and I would say just kind of a lot of relaxation things too. I took a lot of baths, and I made a birth playlist that I would listen to in the bath just to kind of like, because that was like a calming place, and so then my plan was in labor with the playlist, it would kind of bring me back to the calming of the bath and stuff. So he was good about never wanted my bath to be too warm. So we didn't have like a bath thermometer at the time. So we used a meat thermometer to make sure my water wasn't too hot. So he took care of me that way. That was good. And yeah, just I would say kind of, and I was active throughout my entire pregnancy. I worked out up until like 38 weeks. Went on walks almost every single day. So I think that helped prep wise. Yeah, but those are probably the main things. We didn't do any of the I didn't do like any essential oils or anything like that, but it probably would have helped, but I just didn't do that. And then towards, I think starting at probably like 32 weeks or so, I did the red raspberry leaf tea and the dates. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you feel like that was helpful? The red raspberry leaf or the dates or any of that, like coming up, just even you mentioning that you gave birth at 39 weeks. That was so interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like people have asked me that since then, and I feel like it's hard because it was my first baby, so I didn't have anything to compare it to. So like I don't know if it helped or not. I guess I have no real data to say it did or not, but
That's fair. Okay, well let's dive into the birth. Let's hear about all the nitty-gritties of the birth story. So tell me about your first contraction all the way through.
Okay, so I knew this was coming because I listened to a lot of the podcast. And just to, like, I guess my birth story starts way before the contractions, because contractions did not come until much later into labor, I suppose you could say. Although for a while I didn't really feel like I was in labor. So I guess to start at the beginning, like I said before, I had him at 39 weeks exactly. So we were scheduled for our 39-week appointment with our OB. Our appointment was at like 7 a.m. that morning. So we got up. It was about 6. I was going to shower and stuff and get ready for work. So I was leaving to go to work right after our appointment. Got up, went to the bathroom, and had the infamous pop of water breaking. Like people say you may or may not experience. So I experienced it, but still, even though like looking back, it was very obvious, I was like, oh, okay, I don't know what just happened. So I like finished going to the bathroom, whatever. I stood up and yeah, my water had broke. It was very obvious then. And so my husband was still in bed, so I kind of just like waddled into the bedroom and was like, I think my water just broke. And he's like, you think or you know? I'm like, I know it did. So we had mostly everything packed, but nothing was in the car yet or anything like that. So, and like I said, we were supposed to be leaving for our 39-week appointment in like 15 minutes. So previously we had talked with my OB about like when to come to the hospital, obviously, contractions. He was like, you come to the hospital whenever you think you need to. He's like, labor, like, he's like, you can do your thing here at the hospital if you come in early. But he's also like, we had talked a lot about my birth plan and stuff, so he knew, and he was very on board with everything that I wanted. I wanted unmedicated. I didn't want to be induced, all of that stuff. But with water breaking, he did say, like, when your water breaks, we'd like you to come in, like, as soon as possible. So I knew that, and I know there's mixed feelings about that, but with first time mom, I was willing to follow the rules. Yeah, so I knew that my water had broke, and we were supposed to be on our way anyways. So I was like, you know what? We're packing the car. We're going in. I guess we're going to have this baby. We packed the car and then got in the car, and on the way there, I called labor and delivery, and I just said, hey, my water just broke. We're doing good, though. I'm supposed to have my 39-week appointment. Like, should I come to you guys or should I go to my appointment? And they're like, well, actually, your doctor is here right now checking on another mom, so let's ask him, see what he thinks, and then we'll call you back. So they talked to my doctor, and the doctor said, just come here. Let's save us both a trip back to the clinic. And then he's like, I'll just check you out here, and we'll see what we're going to do. So we get there, get checked in. At this point, like, it just felt like I was continuing to pee my pants. I had no contractions, no cramps, nothing. Like, my water had just broken. Otherwise, I felt perfectly normal. So we got checked in, and we saw my doctor, and they confirmed that my water was broke, even though I don't know why they needed to do that. The little test or whatever where they test the fluid. But I guess she tried to do it. As she was going to do it, like I said, like, my water was like, it was continuing to leak. And she's like, okay, your water's broke. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's why I'm here. But anyways, when we got there, my doctor had like 3 other moms there. And it's a fairly small hospital. I think there's only 4 delivery rooms. And all the delivery rooms were full of laboring moms. So we just got put in the postpartum room or whatever, the recovery room, which was fine because I felt perfectly fine. So we did a lot of walking up and down the hallways. They gave me a birth ball. I was bouncing on that. I was doing squats. I was doing lunges. I was doing all the things to try to get something going. Took a nap. One of my friends had said, bring some board games if you're going to be there for a while. So we brought some board games. We played some games, watched some Netflix. We did a lot. I think throughout that, so we checked in about 7 o'clock in the morning. We did that until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, about 2 p.m. And still at this point, I was maybe a little crampy, but that was probably just in my head. And I was probably hungry too. I know I was hungry. Then at around 2 o'clock, there was finally a delivery room open for us. We went into the delivery room, but same kind of thing. And I think so between 7 and 2, I think they had checked me, did a cervical check twice. I think the second one was at 2. So I think the first one was somewhere earlier during the day, and then the second one was at 2. And I was not progressing at all. I think when I checked in, I was at my 36-week appointment. I had 1 cervical exam. I was at 1 centimeter. When I checked in, I think I was at 1.5, and nothing had changed. And from 6 o'clock, my water broke till 2 p.m. And so knowing my birth plan, the doctor said, hey, your water's been broke for a while. You've been doing all the things. How do you feel about a little Pitocin? And I completely broke down. I said, well, when he was in there, I put on a strong face, and I was like, can you give me a little bit? I'm going to think about it. And he said, yep, absolutely. I've got plenty of other moms to go check on. I'll go check on them. I'll be right back. So, and then after he left, it was just me and my husband, and I broke down. I was like, I know, I don't want to do it. I'm scared. Like, I kind of told myself that I could do this unmedicated thing as long as I didn't have to be induced. And to me, this felt like I was being induced. And I was just like, I felt like I couldn't do it. The nurse came in, one of the nurses came in, saw me, that I was obviously very upset, and she sat down. She was the sweetest lady in the world, and she's just like, tell me tell me what you're scared of. Tell me everything. So we did. My husband talked for me if I couldn't really say what I wanted to say. At the end, she just said, like, you said multiple times that you trust your doctor. She's like, and he knows what he's doing. She's like, can we just try a little bit of Pitocin, and see what happens? And so with all my birth plan, my husband and I also said, like, at the end of the day, we trust this doctor with my life and my baby's life. Like, we trust him so much. He's earned our trust these last 40 weeks. We can, like, if he suggests something and he can convince us to do it, we'll do it. So we felt convinced. We felt like this was the right move. We didn't know. I didn't know. I mean, at this point, like, nothing was happening. I was like, maybe this is what I need just to get it kicked in. So we did a little bit of Pitocin, and they had a wireless monitor for me, but for whatever reason, it did not want to work that day. And so I couldn't have the wireless monitoring, but they were also so good because I still said no to an epidural. I still wanted to be moving around, and they're like, you know what? Okay, like, you move around. She's like, just come back every once in a while and we'll get this monitor on you. And so they did, and I was still, even when I had the monitor, I was able to, bounce on the ball and, like, move around. They would, either me or my husband or a nurse would kind of just hold the monitor where it needed to be as I was bouncing and all that stuff. So, that was good. They were able to take the monitor off for a little while, so I was able to get into the bath. So shortly after they gave me the Pitocin, that's when the contractions started. So finally have some contractions. They started off just a little bit crampy, but they did ramp up pretty quickly, which I think is pretty common with Pitocin. So they got pretty intense. So time kind of, I don't know, stood still / was a blur for a while there. So I don't really know, like, the timeline anymore. I would say contractions probably started about 3:00. They started Pitocin about 2:30, and then about 3:00 contractions started. So I was still able to bounce, like I said, move around, sway. It felt really good just to, like, be, like, in that squatting position, that low squat. So I just kind of, like, squatted on the ground and moved around a little bit. My husband, we had talked, and I printed off papers of, like, the different positions that were helpful. So he had those kind of off to the side. Like, then he would suggest different positions. So then I did get into the bath for a while. That felt really, really good. I was just, like, in the bath, and just had, like, the shower running over me. My husband was just, had the shower running over me. So that felt really good. But then I was just, like, kind of cold. So I just ended up getting out of there for a little while. And let's see here. So that was basically what we did for a while. Okay. So then it was about, like, 5:30. So I'd been doing this for about 2.5, 3 hours. The nurse came in to check me again. So they hadn't checked me since that 2:00 until 5:30. I think she could tell contractions were getting pretty intense. I was out of the bath by then, I think, and just kind of, like, on the bed, just doing lots of different positions. So she came to check me, and the nurse told me that I was complete. I was at 10. She's like, do you feel like you're ready to push? And tears came again, because I was like, no. Like, no, I don't want to do this. I'm not ready. But I kind of attribute it to, like, oh crap, like, yeah, I forgot. Like, I will, like, I was prepared for all of this contraction, this laboring stuff, but, like, when it was ready to like push and have the baby, I felt like super unprepared for that. Well, she's like, well, I'm going to go get the doctor and we'll be right back. So Doc came in, he checked me, and he's like, and I quote his words, "You are at a 5. You have a long ways to go." And I was like, okay. Like, it was, talk about an emotional roller coaster. Like, she said, "Are you ready to push?" I said, no, 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 no. But by the time he got there, I had convinced myself. And then when to hear, like, "You have a long ways to go," I was like, okay, that's not what I wanted to hear, because, I mean, the contractions were intense at that point. So we continued doing what we were doing. And then about 2 hours later, so around 7:30, I was feeling like I was getting ready to have to push. I could feel a difference in my body. I think they could notice. I was like, I don't really know what everybody else was doing around me, but they must have been able to notice that I was getting close. So then she came and she said, "Can I check you again?" I said, "Yes." She's like, "Okay, you're out of 10. Same sweet nurse who calmed me down and talked about the Pitocin. So like, she's an amazing lady. But she said, "Okay, you're out of 10. And I looked at her and I said, "Are you for real this time?" Because I was like, I'm not doing like this roller coaster again. She said, "Yes, I'm for sure. I'm going to go get the doctor." So the doctor came in. He's like, "Yep, you're ready." And then after that, things just kind of, I think one more nurse came in. Doctor had gloves on, all that stuff. Like, it was go time. So I tried a couple different positions. I was on like all fours. I did like on my side. I got out of the bed for a little while and I was kind of like squatting, and nothing really was, none of those things were really like working. So then finally I was getting tired. I'm still having contractions, so it still hurt. And so I finally just decided to kind of just lay on my back for a little while. And then we did a couple of pushes on my back, and that's when things actually started to like progress, and it felt best on my back. So I ended up delivering on my back. I never thought I would, but that's how it ended up working. So like I said, doctor came in, checked me about 7:30. So I would say I started pushing probably about 8. And babe was born at 9:15. So I pushed for about an hour and 15 minutes. So that was enough for me. And it was, yeah, like I said, throughout that whole hour and 15 minutes, I tried multiple positions. But yeah, so at 9:15, he was born. He was a surprise. We didn't know if he was going to be a boy or a girl. So, doctor held him up and said, I still had my eyes closed, and he said, "Look what you got." So I looked up and he was a boy, and I was like, it's a boy, because I had no idea either way. We had one boy name picked out, so we knew his name right away. They said, "What's his name?" I said his name, and yeah, that was the story. So I felt, like I said, I felt super prepared for like dealing with the contractions and working through those. And I never once considered getting an epidural, even after the Pitocin. I think I just had my mind set on it, and like my husband and I knew what to do. So I never once, doctor came in one time and said, through all of that, and said like, "How you doing? Need anything?" I said, "Nope." And I had told the delivery team and my husband, I don't want the word epidural to come out of anybody's mouth except for my doctor's. I said, I don't want my husband to say it. I don't want a nurse to say it. The only reason I want an epidural is if, again, my doctor thinks that I need it. I need it to continue progressing. I need it for whatever reason, to give my body a break, whatever that reason is. So I said, I don't want the word epidural to come out of anybody's mouth. It didn't even come out of his mouth, because he just said, "Do you need anything?" We all knew what he meant. But No one ever pushed an epidural or anything. So yeah, did it without an epidural. But the pushing, that's what I was least prepared for. I didn't know what I was doing. Like, and it didn't feel natural for whatever reason. In any of the positions, it felt most natural on my back, like I said. And a couple of times through the pushing, I said that was the only time throughout my entire labor that I said ow or that it hurt. Like, the pushing was the only part. At one point, I kept on saying, like, I can't do this, I can't do this. And my doctor looked me straight in the eye and said, we don't say that in my delivery room. He's like, you can yell, you can say whatever you want. He's like, but you're not going to say you can't do this. So I didn't say that anymore. And yeah, so, and then, so after he was born about 9:15, like I said. We had talked about to my doctor how I wanted to do delayed cord clamping, and he's like, I never cut it early anyways. He's like, some of my other colleagues do it after like a minute or two. He's like, I like to wait at least 5. So I said 5 is great. I was like, if we can and need to go longer, if it's still pulsing or whatever, I'd like to do that. He said, yep, that's fine. He kind of said, okay, we'll see. So I kind of know what we'll see means, but he seemed open enough to it. But anyways, so after he was born, I was bleeding quite a bit. And so he said, he's like, if you're okay with it, I'd like to clamp the cord so I can see where this blood is coming from. If it's coming from, just if we need to be aware. So he's like, I'm going to wait 3 minutes. And then if you're okay with it, we'll cut the cord. So we waited 3 minutes. At this point too, I was just like I had my baby. He was on my chest. Like, we were exhausted. I wasn't really up for any sort of arguments at that time. Nor did I feel like it was the most important thing to argue about. So, I said, that's okay. So my husband cut the cord. The nurses had our phones too at this point. So we got pictures of him cutting the cord and all that stuff. We would have never thought about that, but the nurse asked my husband somewhere along the line, like, I can take your phone if you want me to and take pictures. And he's like, oh, sure. So we have pictures, which is fun. We'll never do anything with them besides keep them ourselves. But so anyways, after they cut the cord, the doctor said that the bleeding was just coming. I had a small tear in like 2 different spots, but he said it was just the positioning of the tear. It just kind of caused a little bit. It was the tear bleeding, not like anything internally that was a problem, I guess. So I had Babe on my chest the whole time. He stitched me up a little bit. And after that, everything was looking really good. He showed us the placenta. He held it up and opened it up for us and said, this is this is the placenta. And like, how cool is that? And we're like, didn't know I would be looking at that. It wasn't my plan to look at the placenta, but it was cool to see that too. And then everybody left. And we had just my husband, our new baby, and I in that delivery room for over 2.5 hours. No one came in, or maybe they came in like once or twice just to make sure everything was fine. But I guess they had lots of other things going on, and we didn't need them. So we got the golden hour, I guess, for 2.5 hours, which was amazing. My husband had like texted our family and said like, babe is here. It's a boy, told him his name or whatever. And they were all texting us being like, how big is he? Like, and all this. And we're like, I don't know. Like, they haven't measured him yet. So we didn't have any of the measurements or whatever. But so then about 11:45 at night, they came back in and they said, like, if you're ready, like, we can kind of get him cleaned up a little bit and get mom cleaned up and weigh him and all that stuff. So they weighed him and got everybody cleaned up, and then we went back to our room and back to our recovery room. So that was, that's the story, and it was amazing.
That sounds amazing. What a neat, oh my gosh, I feel like there's so much that happened in all of that for sure. Tell me,
Yeah.
I'm curious about the Pitocin And I know other moms will be too.
Yeah.
So did you have continuous Pitocin the entire time? Was there any time that you turned it off? And what were those contractions like for you?
The Pitocin continued for most of the time. I think like when I was starting to push, I think is when they turned it off, and they did continue to kind of ramp it up for a while. They gave me some, and then they like ramped it up a little bit, and then they backed it down, and then things kind of did stop for a little, like not stop, but I don't know, I guess, yeah, stopped or slowed down or whatever. So they did continue pushing Pitocin the whole time. Again, I have nothing to compare it to as far as like contractions without Pitocin and contractions with Pitocin, but the contractions were manageable. Like, I really truly thought from like everything that I heard about Pitocin that if I got Pitocin, it just like it was going to be miserable, and I was never going to be able to do it, and the only way I could have done it was with an epidural. But they were manageable, and I truly did feel like I still had the wave, like the contraction building up, the peak, and then they would slow back down, and I would get a break. So I did have breaks in between the contractions, and I think I either heard it on the birth course or a podcast or something. Like, I did like the whole time, like the contraction was, they were about a minute, like about a minute long for most of the time. So I was just telling myself over and over, like 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. Like, you can do this for 1 minute. And the breaks in between did get shorter. So then I would be like, after it would be slow down, I'd be like, okay, like I got a couple minutes or whatever. But that couple minutes was never a couple of minutes. But even if I just told myself, like, okay, you get a couple minute break now, and then just like 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, that helped. So I guess contractions overall were manageable, and they were not near as scary or as horrible as I thought they were going to be. I may experience natural contractions someday and change my mind, but for being the first time, they were manageable. I don't know.
That's awesome.
And I did have that break, I guess, that I was afraid I would never have. So.
No, that's so good. You mentioned a lot of things that you tried to do position-wise and whatever to get your body into labor on its own before you used Pitocin. Once contractions were going, what were you doing physically? You kind of mentioned some of that mental work that you were doing, like I can do this for a minute, and you get a little bit of a break, that mental talk that we do. But was there any other like emotional things that you used, or physical, like what positions were you using, or how were you changing position to kind of cope with what you were feeling? Or did your husband do anything?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I did a lot of just kind of like swaying, bouncing on a birth ball, squats. That position felt good. And then I would say when the contractions were the most intense, what I found was like I was on the bed, and just like the bed was at an incline, and so I was just like kind of facing backwards on the bed, and just kind of doing like kind of like a back and forth swaying motion, and that helped. My husband did do some counter pressure for me in that position, and that felt good too. I don't think I wanted him to touch me as much as I maybe thought I was going to. I pretty much handled it mostly on my own, but he was there like emotionally and mentally more than physically, I would say. But yeah, that's probably where I spent most of my time, just kind of like rocking like on all fours on the bed is what felt best. The bath, like I said too, did feel good too.
Yeah. How do you feel like he supported you? Was there any specific things that he was doing that was really helpful during that time, even if it was just being in the room itself?
Yeah, absolutely. Just being there. He never left. And they they did offer him, like, when I was getting, like, when the contractions were pretty intense, they're like, we do have a cart out here of supper for you if you want it. And I remember thinking in the back of my head, if you go eat that supper, I swear. But he said, no, I think I'm okay right now. I was like, yes, you are just fine. You're not leaving. So they're like, we can sit with her while you go grab a bite to eat. And he said no, which I was very happy for.
Notes,
but no, just being there.
Yeah.
Yes, don't eat your supper. um, but anyways, yeah, so just being there, like I kind of had printed off like some of the different positions that I had learned about. So he had those kind of in the back pocket. So he would just every once in a while say, hey, do you want to try this? Like just a couple different things. Sometimes I would say yes, sometimes I would say no. Um, yeah, and then so it was kind of our thing throughout my whole pregnancy. Every night before we went to bed, we would just say a quick prayer. Um, just for our baby and just for us or whatever. So we said the same prayer every night. And so a couple of times throughout labor, he just kind of like got real close to me and said, hey, do you want to say a prayer? And I said, yep. And so then most of the time I couldn't talk. So he just like said the prayer that we had been saying, just kind of in my ear quietly for us to hear or whatever. And so that was really helpful too. Just kind of bringing that into it. Yeah, but just being there was the most beneficial thing for me.
I love it. Okay, before we jump off, I'd love for you to offer some advice for moms and advice for dads.
Yeah. Let's see here. Advice for moms. I would just say do your own research. There's so much out there, and don't feel like you have to know or do it all. Like you will drive yourself absolutely insane trying to know every single thing. So do as much as you can handle, and then pick and choose what's right for you. I know, like I felt like I made a lot of good decisions for myself and for my baby. I know there was plenty of other things that I had read about or that people suggested that I could have done. But just do what feels good for you and your husband. And if you have a provider that you trust, which if you don't, find one. But yeah, and just know you can do it. Don't write yourself off for I kind of had, like I had some doubts going into it, like, oh, if I have to get induced, I'm not gonna be able to do it unmedicated, all that kind of stuff. You can. If you put your mind to it. So that would be my suggestion for moms. And for dads, I would also say trust your wife. I know it's your baby too, and I know you're in it together, but I truly do feel like there's something behind like a mother's intuition. So trust your wife and listen to her, even if she's got some ideas that you hadn't considered or anything like that. Trust her and just be part of the process. My husband did not miss a single appointment. He was at every single appointment. He even came to my 6-week follow-up appointment. Just be there for her. That's probably the most helpful thing than anything else that you can do is just being there for her. So trust her and just be there for her, hold her hand through all of it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Jaycie. Thank you so much for your time and for your story and your wisdom. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.